I'm really hoping one of these days PSA opens up some type of really weird $25,000 card grading service. Maybe they'll call it Super Premium Triple Dank Fuego Elite Fuego-ness. I don't know, but whatever it is, it'll be the sickest flex in the world to have one of your cards graded at that tier. And may I just say, it'll be a brave new world after that. Seriously though, friends, grading prices have been going up for years now, and while a lot of people have argued that the changes we saw in 2020 and 2021 are here to stay permanently and you should be adjusting for those new prices, I have three reasons that I'll share with you today why I think grading prices are more likely to go down than they are to go up in 2021 and 2022. But before anything else, as we always do, let's roll that intro. Hey Gengar Gang, what is going on? My name is Ryan, this is the Analytic Gengar, and welcome to another video. In today's video, friends, we talk about my three reasons why I think grading prices for grading your Pokemon cards and other trading card game collectible cards will actually be decreasing in the near future. Now, this topic is going to be a little bit against the grain, and the reason I say that is because for the most part, the market sentiment is that the prices for grading trading cards will remain high. Now, to very quickly summarize everything that has gone on, in 2020 we saw PSA, BGS get inundated with trading cards as more and more people return to the hobby. However, because of the global pandemic, we saw the shutdown of those grading card companies. Now, because of a weird combination of way too much volume and not enough capacity to handle it, we saw wait times go crazy stupid high and demand continue to skyrocket, even though everything said it probably should have slowed down. As a final summary and result of all of this, we ended up in a situation where grading companies began progressively increasing their prices. Probably a two-part approach. One was to maximize the profit that they were getting, and two was to use the increasing prices as a deterrent, meaning stopping people from submitting trading cards so that they could catch up on all the cards that they had in queue to be graded. Now, all of this to say, we ended up, long story short, in a situation where prices have continued to remain high, and that's even assuming that you can submit to your favorite trading company, because most of them are either shut down or not accepting any additional submissions at this time as they work through a backlog that spans probably as severe as March of last year. So that puts us in a really weird situation because these prices remain incredibly high, even though there was a time when cards could grade for $8 a card back in January of 2019 if you were using a bulk submission service. So a lot of people have now come to the conclusion that because PSA, BGS, and CGC see that they have the ability to charge stupid amounts of money and yet still have incredibly high demand for their services, they simply won't leave that on the table. Meaning to say, they won't just simply turn away, a $50 price tag because they know people will still demand that at that price point. And that's a key element of supply and demand. The argument is that you can only supply at a price point at which people are willing to pay. If you do it too cheaply, you'll have a surplus and people will always want to buy your stuff, and you may not be able to provide it with the capacity at which they're demanding it. And if you price too highly, they will either seek out a competitor or they will simply not purchase your goods or services as frequently as they would if you were to have lowered your prices. So we're playing with supply and demand here. We're playing with the very basics of any type of free money market economy. And long story short, the idea is, if people are going to pay $50 now, the assumption is that people will be willing to pay $50 in the future. So in today's video, again, my hope is to introduce you to three different topics and points that I think make a pretty compelling case that prices will go down in the future. Now, that first one is price competition. Here's how things go. In a perfect world where there exists only one service which we could use, let's just hypothetically say PSA was that one service. What would happen is everyone would only be willing to purchase from that one provider. So PSA would have 100% of the customer base, and realistically, if they were the only grading company in the world, they would be able to charge whatever amount they wanted because they were the only people there. However, basic economics tells us that whenever you introduce competitors to a sales situation or an economy in general, what ends up happening is those various competitors will now compete for prices. So, in practical terms, what does this mean? Well, right now we have a bunch of different grading companies that are somewhere along in their recovery and their return back to normal. So most of them have suspended their basic grading services, and in addition to that, most of them are having a very limited offering of what it is they're willing to grade. So as an example, PSA has, I believe, just the Super Express $200 card service, and that was the only thing that returned as of July 2021. Similarly, BGS and CGC aren't necessarily accepting every single thing that comes their way. They're only accepting services that are very clearly going to have a high dollar amount associated with them, and therefore make them tons of money as well. So the thing is that I predict price competition is going to play a role in this. And the reason I predict that is because it's been happening this entire time. Whenever we saw a grading company slow down or have an inability to capitalize on the very high demand for graded cards, we immediately then saw a competitor jump up and swear that they were offering a better service at a better price with less wait time. And this isn't uncommon. This is how competitors would logically compete. Because if PSA has a 6-month wait, CGC can jump up and say, hey, we'll grade your cards for $2 cheaper, as well as grade your cards in 30 days. And that alone means, hey, I'm going to incentivize you to come to me instead of to PSA. And you could swap around any of these different companies, but you get the point. The idea is that these companies will consistently try to undercut. Now, let's just play this hypothetical out to its extreme. There will come a time when all grading services will resume, and it's my prediction that they will try to resume these services at the highest possible value. So you may see a value, quote unquote, submission, right? Something for $199 maximum value be, something in the range of like $50, right? And again, part of this is to ensure that there is a price deterrent on the table. So we're starting the prices high to make sure that people don't immediately flood us with trading cards and then basically create a brand new backlog in the course of a few weeks. But then, sooner or later, that backlog is going to clear up as well. So now all of a sudden, you have 3 grading companies, all of whom want to continue to grade cards. PSA might say, okay, it's $50 a card. And then one day they're going to say, oh, here's a, collector special for our paid members. You can grade cards at $45. And then nothing's going to happen. But the next time they run a special, CGC might join in as well. Only difference is CGC may say, instead of $45, let's do $40. We're going to beat PSA. And because the backlog is cleared and things have normalized, wait times are like normal, like they were back in the day before 2020. And so now all of a sudden you have a little bit of undercutting going on. And then the next time this happens, BGS is going to turn around and say, okay, we'll do $37, 20 days. And before you know it, they're going to start cutting those prices down. And the next thing that's going to happen is one of these major companies is going to come out and say, you know what, we're decreasing the price on value because A, we don't need a deterrent anymore, and B, we're going to stick the middle finger to the other two and say, hey, I'm going to beat you every day, all day, 365 days a year. So instead of a $50 value submission, you now pay $35 any day of the week, no membership required. But then PSA is going to hear about what CGC just did and say, oh no, $20. And then before you know it, there's going to be a lot of downward pressure because that's the way the market typically tends to operate. A lot of people have been ignoring this basic economic law because they assume that the backlog and the price deterrence will always be there. And I don't believe either of those two will be there. My next point is going to be on the declining demand for trading cards that are graded, and that plays a part in the backlog because a lot of people want to create graded trading cards, so a lot of people went ahead and submitted them. But the truth of the matter is, with that demand now gone from its artificial high to a more normal or new normal, dare I say, what ends up happening is there's no reason to keep prices that high because no one's going to buy your product at that artificially high level. Again, we'll get into that in a little bit. So, price competition, expect to see it play out. It will take some time, but I have a very strong feeling it will create a very strong downward pressure to ensure that trading card prices for grading services continue to decline over the next, I would say, 18 to 24 months. As previously mentioned, the next thing up for discussion is going to be the demand for graded trading cards. So, I've covered the topic before, many other YouTubers have, but needless to say, we were in a junk slab era. There was a time in January of 2021 where graded Sun and Moon hollows that were PSA 10s were selling for approximately $100. And that is a symptom of a far larger illness within the hobby. Hear me out. As soon as Pokemon took off in 2020, graded trading cards became one of the main ways of investing, quote unquote, and also one of the main ways to collect because everyone liked the idea of having a 10 or having a 9 or having a graded card that wouldn't deteriorate in value any further if the condition also deteriorated. Technically, a PSA 10 is a PSA 10 and will remain so, assuming the slab is never damaged, opened, or tampered with in any meaningful way. So, as a result of the preference for graded trading cards, what ended up happening is a lot of people began realizing this is an excellent way to make a lot of money because the cards raw were not proportionally valued to the graded cards, meaning there was a very big upside or profit margin to be made if you could get your hands on a good set of raw cards, have them graded at PSA, BGS, CGC, and then turn around and sell them. And I'm not even going to pretend like I haven't demonstrated that fact. This isn't anecdotal evidence, I have the math to back it because one of my recent PSA submissions that happened during 2020 was a huge profit to me. And that just goes to show you that I wasn't even doing that with the intention of profit. So for someone who was, and someone who can find their way around and assemble the best possible cards, the upside can be many times greater. Mind you, I was sitting at about 200 times profit. So you can 200% profit rather, not 200 times, 200%. So for someone who was really looking for a profit margin, they could probably do 400% profit, 600% profit. It really wouldn't surprise me. So as a result of all of that, my theory is that there was a lot of artificial demand placed in the market. Let's just assume that there are some people in the hobby who wanted to make money, right? That's the only reason they were here in 2020 and maybe even the early part of 2021. You're going to submit a lot of cards because you know the more cards you submit, the more money you make. Period. End of story. As a result of this, there's obviously a very clear reason why if the prices of cards began to decline, you would stop submitting trading cards. And I think this is another big driver that we are going to see affect grading prices. Because with these people now slowly either leaving the hobby because it's no longer a profitable enterprise for them, or high prices continuing to severely impact profit margins, there will be less cards submitted. You won't have folks like the entrepreneur, quote unquote, who decides to make some money using Pokemon cards. Instead, those people are going to leave, and the only people left are going to be folks like maybe myself or Rhymestyle who just submit cards for the sake of having graded cards in your collection. So, as a result of that, we're going to see a huge decline in the amount of submissions that are happening, especially as things begin to level out. And as a result of that, PSA, BGS, CGC are going to have really high prices, and a lot of people who frankly don't want to pay those prices because there's just no demand for grading services at those prices. Basic economics and law of supply and demand states that when such a situation exists, the best thing a service provider can do is lower the cost of their services to hopefully entice people to purchase their services at this lower price point. And bear in mind, there will be some people who will submit at these higher price points. That's a given. But I think the fact that it's a price deterrent will also do that. Because let's face it, if I pull an ADP alt art from Cosmic Eclipse, I might just keep it in my binder if I know it's going to be, a $50 grade for a card from a modern set. It just doesn't make any sense as a collector. Now, as a quote-unquote entrepreneur, I would have said, oh, well, I can sell the card for $600 and it's $50 and that's $550 profit and that's pretty cool, so I think I'm going to roll with that. But that's not how many collectors think. And again, we've already discussed this, but the high prices are taking a huge chunk out of the profit of a lot of different people. And a lot of people are probably leaving right now as we speak because honestly it's taking too long to make a profit off this stuff. They'd rather flip PlayStations from Amazon on Facebook Marketplace, and they probably achieve better daily volume and better bottom line numbers. So in reality, with less of those people in the hobby, there creates more downward pressure for prices to decline because again, those are the people who drove an artificial increase in demand, and with that now gone, prices will have to come down to adjust to this new level of demand because, put simply, collectors won't be biting at these current price points. Now, my third and final point on a factor that might drive prices down, according to my own predictions, is this idea of volume versus price. So right now, PSA, BGS, CGC, they're charging a lot of money. And let's be real here, they're charging more money than we have ever seen before. To put simply, there was a point in time in the past where, reasonably, you could grade a card for 50% of some of the current prices, and these were like value TCG. I remember grading cards for $6 a card, and that was from the most recent set of cards that I got back. So it wasn't too long ago that those were the normal prices for trading cards. So there's this argument that a lot of people very recently remember those prices. And so for someone like myself, I've been stockpiling cards that I want to get graded, but I simply won't grade them because I know I'm in this for the long run. And so it doesn't matter if it's 2 years from now, 4 years from now, or 6 years from now, I'll get them graded when prices are back to normal. And that's a bad thing for PSA, BGS, and CGC. Why do you ask? Well, because if I'm holding off and everybody else is holding off, or a fair number of us are holding off, it's going to impact all of the grading companies at one point or the other because we're not providing them their main means of making money. From the investor standpoint, there's also this argument that $50 was at one point in this hobby's history not a lot of money. There was a point when honestly you could buy something in Target, walk outside, and sell it on Facebook Marketplace for double the money you paid before you even got back to your car. That is simply no longer the case. Most modern product is returning to near normal, if not within 100% markup, as opposed to days when it was 100+% markup. And graded cards are in a similar situation where people are hesitant to purchase some cards, and B, the only cards that are really holding their value are ones that are fundamentally sound, meaning they're vintage, they're rare, they have some sort of special differentiator or story that establishes them fundamentally as something to hold value. Put a different way, that Rayquaza from Crimson Invasion simply can't and won't hold value, and it doesn't surprise anyone if that card sells for half the price it did back in January of 2021. Sorry PWCC, sorry person who bought that card for nearly $100. So, with those two things in mind, and the idea that hobbyists are going to be holding off, and maybe investors simply don't want to pay $50 anymore because the profit simply isn't there for them anymore. We know for a fact that people aren't going to be submitting with the same volume that they were in the past. Couple that with some news that we got from PSA saying that they've expanded their California space and that they're looking to purchase new space in the US, as well as CGC making significant investments in their own space and resources for grading trading cards, and tons of stuff that I'm sure BGS is doing to stay relevant and compete with the other two. We know for a fact that they've made several long-term capital investments in their grading services space that will require sufficient volume. What does that mean? That means they bought a lot of stuff and they have to use that stuff now. So now, as things begin to normalize, you have a couple different options. You could attempt to grade as many cards as you can at $50 a card, let's just hypothetically say, and hope that you hit that new maximum. The problem is that you may be underutilizing those capital assets that you've invested in. So I'll use PSA as an example because I know PSA the best. PSA went ahead and expanded their facilities in California. What does that mean? They bought a whole bunch of new space, they expanded the seating area, they bought new computers, new cooling, new everything to grade a lot of trading cards. And now if you're going to tell me, well, it's $50 a card, I simply won't submit as many cards, because why would I? I'm only going to submit the cards that are the most valuable. What does that mean on the back end for PSA? Well, it means you're going to have fewer cards to grade. And if that happens on a macroeconomic scale, you're underutilizing all of those permanent enhancements you made because your prices are too high. So what do? You create values, you create specials, you create any type of promotional deal that gets more cards in the door. And what does that do? Creates downward pressure to normalize those lower prices, because PSA, BGS, CGC is going to see by real life data that at the lower price, they're getting more demand. And that's where they're going to want to operate. They're going to want to lower their prices so that all of those investments that they made can be utilized at the correct leverage ratio. And as long as they do that, they'll be in a really good situation, because all of those long-term investments will not only pay off for themselves, but they'll also go ahead and make them a crap ton of money. Here's the other thing. PSA this time last year, more or less, said business is too good. And business was too good at 2020 pre-pandemic price points. So we all have a very short memory here in the Pokemon TCG community. We tend to remember a lot of really important things. So what does that mean? Well, we remember those prices and we know business was really good for you back then. So we know for a fact that if you charge those prices today, you'd still be really good. And so I think it's fair to say that we can at least assume that these prices that they have right now are at least some part price deterrent, but at another capacity are really just trying to maximize profit, which is fine given the current situation we're in with the whole, tons of cards and backlog right now. But there will come a time when there is no more backlog, they can turn cards around at a normal pace, and at that point, we're going to look to them and say, so when are these prices coming down? Because I remember when it was all good and copacetic at $8 a card value bulk submissions, and that's the price point that I frankly want to submit at. And when they list a $50 price point, I have a feeling not a lot of people are going to bite. And that is a key difference between the volume that they've prepared for and the price point that they currently sit at. There's a drastic mismatch there because they're prepared to see the same number of cards they have for the past couple of months, realizing that people may not want the price point at which it takes to get your cards to a grading service. But with all that said, friends, that is my 3-point item list for today. Long story short, I think there's a couple of key trends that people tend to ignore when considering grading prices right now, as well as some downward facing factors that people are overlooking. And I think the combination is effectively just creating a little blind spot where people are looking only at the fact that prices are going to remain artificially high, when those prices were artificially high only because of artificially driven demand. Now that that demand is gone, prices may have to go downward in order to meet that new intersection point of supply and demand. Where demand is lower, supply may have to, adjust so that the price is at the correct point in order for our demand to meet their supply of the grading services that they offer. But with all that said, friends, that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, or if you learned anything new, feel free to leave a like down below on the video. And if you're not already, feel free to subscribe to join the Gengar Gang for our little community to grow just a little bit more. We're always glad to have you, and we're happy to have you join in on the journey. But with all that said, friends, thanks again for checking out another video. As always, I appreciate your viewership. And with all that said, here's to the $6 specials for Pokemon cards coming back for PSA, so your boy can get his random stupid GX pulls graded. And we will talk soon. Peace.